The Imphal campaign began on March 8, 1944. Soldiers carried only a 3-week supply of food. They had brought along some cattle to eat later, but most of them drowned in the rivers along the way. About a month after they had set out, the Japanese troops reached the outskirts of Imphal. Heavy shelling from British tanks, however, prevented them from advancing any further. With almost all supply lines cut, they had already exhausted their fuel, food, and ammunition. The British, on the other hand, held air supremacy over the region and could drop supplies to their troops. With the onset of the monsoon season in the later part of May, the Japanese soldiers suffered not only from hunger but from malaria and dysentery. Then, on June 1st, an unprecedented situation occurred. The commander of one of the 3 Japanese army divisions in the operation acted on his own authority and withdrew his troops. This only worsened the predicament of the remaining 2 divisions. It was obvious that the Imphal campaign had been a mistake. The army general and the commander of the 15th Army were clearly aware that the operation was a fiasco. Yet no one dared call an end to it. To do so would have been tantamount to admitting personal error. As a result, the campaign dragged on. Because of their irresponsibility and desire for self-protection, the military commanders turned their backs on their soldiers on the front line, leaving them to die not only on the battlefield but of starvation and disease. More than a few of these abandoned soldiers decided to take their own lives. The Imphal operation was finally suspended in the beginning of July, almost 4 months after it began. Troop evacuation was also grim. The road from Imphal back to Burma was littered with so many corpses that it came to be known as the Skeleton Trail. Of the original force of 1 lakh, more than 30,000 lost their lives, with as many as 40,000 wounded or disabled by disease. The irresponsibility of the Japanese command that led to these tragic losses stands in marked contrast to the deep sense of responsibility of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces and later the 34th President of the United States, who coordinated the Allied landing of Normandy in June 1944. Eisenhower did all in his power to ensure the success of the Normandy invasion, the largest military operation ever undertaken by making preparations of all contingencies. He even went so far as to prepare a press release in the event the operation failed. Handwritten in pencil, his statement read, "Our landings have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and navy did all that bravery and devotion could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, It is mine alone. The great success of the Normandy invasion, however, prevented the need for his statement. The victory can perhaps be attributed to the true thoroughness of the preparations and the sense of responsibility to prepare for failure even before launching into action. In any event, the failure of the Imphal campaign succeeded only in worsening Japan's position in Burma, leading to a succession of crushing defeats that forced them further and further into retreat. During the Imphal campaign, Shinichi Yamamoto's eldest brother Kiko worked as an ordnance dispatch clerk, responsible for sending supplies to the troops at the front. After the campaign was suspended, he was assigned to the area near Mringan, where the Irrawaddy, now Aryayawadi, and Chindwin rivers meet. West of Mandalay, the old capital, some 600 kilometers north of Rangoon. There, he was responsible for sending supplies across the river to support the withdrawing troops. He was killed on January 11, 1945, while ferrying supplies across the Irrawaddy. His boat sustained a direct hit from a British warplane. He was 29. Kiko's sunny disposition and his strong sense of responsibility and justice had won him the affection and respect of his younger brothers and sisters. Of all his brothers, Shinichi had admired his eldest brother Kiko the most. He had many memories of the times they had spent together. There was one memory he specially cherished, which involved a broken mirror. When Shinichi was still a young, the mirror part of their mother's trousseau had been broken by incident. From among the fragments, Shinichi and Kiko each kept a palm-sized piece, which became a personal treasure for both of them. When Kiko was drafted and sent off to war, he carried his fragment with him. Shinichi felt certain that Kiko took out the mirror while on the battlefront and thought of his mother and younger brother back home. Shinichi himself often looked at his own piece of the mirror and thought of his eldest brother. Kiko had been sent to fight on the Chinese mainland, returning home for a brief furlough in 1941. He told Shinichi of the horrors of war, barely able to contain his anger. The Japanese army is brutal. I feel so sorry for Chinese people. The Japanese are so arrogant. No one should have the right to threaten the lives of those living in peace, bothering no one. This has to be stopped. As he said this, his eyes brimmed with tears. Shinichi, there is nothing glamorous about war. It is ultimately murder. Human beings killing other human beings. Can this be allowed? Aren't we all fellow human beings? But you are a soldier in the Imperial Army, aren't you? Yes, I am. That is why I am telling you this. Because I have seen the war with my own eyes. His brother's words were etched forever in his heart. At that time, Shinichi was attending one of Japan's national people's schools. With the enactment of the National People's Schools Order in April that year, 1941, His school, Haneda Advanced Elementary School, had changed its name to Haginaka National People's School. The National People's School order read in the part to provide basic training as citizens by implementing a standardized course of primary education in accord with the interests of the empire. Schools were dedicated to training junior citizens who would remain loyal subjects. Japan's militarism sought to shape young souls by stamping them from the same nationalistic mold. Shinichi too had learned in the National People's School that fighting and dying for one's country were supreme causes for a true subject of the emperor. He was therefore shocked to hear his brother speak of war this way. As his graduation from the National People's School approached, Shinichi was deeply troubled. With a strong desire to serve his country, he contemplated joining the Junior Pilot Training Corps of the Imperial Japanese Navy. War might be brutal, as Kikau said, he thought, but the war Japan is fighting is a sacred one to protect peace in East Asia. In his innocence, Shinichi believed this. Despite his parents' adamant opposition, Shinichi went ahead and applied to become a junior year cadet. When a Navy official dropped by to follow up his application, however, he was not at home. Shinichi's father was furious. My oldest three boys have already gone to war, and a fourth one is soon to follow. Are you also going to deprive me of my fifth? I have had enough. Moved by his vehemence, the official said, I understand, and left. When Shinichi arrived home, his father thundered, I don't care what happens. You are not going to the war. He had never seen his father so angry. Shinichi was disappointed, but Kiko's words came back to him. He had said, You, Shinichi, have to stay behind and take care of the family. Please give Dad a helping hand and look after Mom. Take care of them for both of us. Reluctantly, he took a job at the nearby Niigata Engineering Company. A military supplier, the company was responsible for manufacturing parts used in the construction of Japanese warships. It had its own youth school where, in addition to the on the job training on the factory floor, young employees received training in the military arts. Their instructor repeatedly stressed that their increased productivity would support the soldiers on the battlefield. Whenever Shinichi heard this, he would think of Kiko and his other brothers on the battlefront and would drive himself on despite his exhaustion. One day, the instructor was explaining the procedure for screw cutting. Using the blackboard to illustrate, his explanation was cursory and Shinichi failed to grasp his meaning. When he ventured a question, the instructor barked back. I beg your pardon? Who cares if you don't understand? Don't give me any lip. The sharp rebuff left no room for discussion. It was also common for students of the youth school to be slapped in the face, forehand and backhand by instructors and senior students. Factories and schools were indistinguishable from the army. The entire population of Japan had had, had in effect been transformed into soldiers. It was around this time that Shinichi started to develop a cough and often found himself running a fever.